Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan with a bonus hot take, and I got to talk about the RNC convention, day 3. Started really strong. The governor of South Dakota, I, and again, I mean no disrespect, but she is absolutely stunning, an absolute stunner. Um, and she opened things up, and I was just like, hooray! um, you know, that's all I could say. She gave a good speech. She always gives a good speech. It doesn't hurt that she's just one of the most gorgeous women I've ever seen. I mean, maybe it's just me. Is it just me? I don't think so. But they had various speakers. This guy's like a logging guy. He's got like a logging company, and they had a lot of speakers like that. They own a company, and they're very patriotic. Um, what I forget. She's a governor too, I think, or a senator. I forget a lot of these guys. Oh, this is Dan Crenshaw. I remember him because he's got the patch, and he told a story about his heroic, almost said adventure. It's not really an adventure in Afghanistan. He talked about one of his buddies saving his life and dying in the process. So that was a pretty moving speech. He was a general. I forget his name. His speech was okay. I mean, they weren't all like out of the park. I forget some of these people. But then Kylie, the press secretary, came out. And she told a really good story, a personal story about that she has a chronic medical condition. And so she talked a little bit about healthcare. So that was a good tie-in. That's Mrs. Pence. She gave a speech. Kellyanne Conway, who's from Hamilton, by the way, South Jersey represent. Then they had this nun who's also got a medical degree, and she gave a pretty interesting speech. I thought it was very interesting to have her on because, and when she came on, I just thought, yeah, I mean, the Republicans are usually pretty religious, and yet I don't remember them ever having someone like this on. So that was interesting. This guy's a coach. I forget what he coaches. This guy's a cop. He looks like a cop, doesn't he? Yeah, he looks like a cop. I forget what her name. It was a lot of women, because it was they were doing a whole Susan B. Anthony theme tonight. This guy, he's running for Congress in, I want to say, North Carolina. But he had a whole speech, and then at the end of the speech, it was about standing up for America, and then at the end he stood up. So with his braces and everything. So that was another one. Then this guy, I believe his name is last name's Brewer. If you know sports, you probably know who he is. He's a lifelong Democrat, and he came out and endorsed Trump. Because, he's sick of all the nonsense from the left. This guy, he's blind, and he's a Chinese human rights activist. And so he talked about China. He was kind of, he couldn't speak English, so he had to be translated, and the translator was not perfectly clear. But, it was still pretty moving. I forget him. That's part of a commercial. That's another part of commercial. It's another politician. I forget her name. Also forget his name. That's Eric Trump's wife, I think. Another stunner, quite frankly. This guy, he had a really sad story about his wife being killed in a senseless act of violence in New Mexico. It was very sad. I forget his name. I don't remember a lot of the names. Sorry. There's so many people. Oh, he is like, he's in the national, he's part of like the intelligence apparatus. And he's also gay. He did a whole log cabin Republican thing in a separate commercial. But in this, he just did like his normal thing. He's pretty high up there in the administration. So when people say Trump doesn't like gay people or whatever, I mean, look, there you go. There's proof that he's totally fine with it. And he talked a lot about that. And here's Pence, and I guess it just went right into Pence. So Pence, did okay. He is a sort of standard politician. He's very standard, and he's a Republican, so he does a Republican thing. I mean, you swap out a few choice sentences and concepts, he could have done, the Democrat thing like 10 years ago, right? But, overall, he was pretty bland. And let's see. About the most exciting thing was, let's see if I can find it. Oh, man, come on. There was an audience. If I could show you. Where? I don't know why I can't find it. Okay. Well, as you can see, there was some amount of audience. I don't know who she is. But there was, if I could stop right there, it is. See, they had an audience. They weren't wearing masks, and they were kind of social distancing, but not really. But there was enough people here to make they realized they needed people to make the speech, to make the speech work. And people on the screen just didn't work for the DNC. So his speech was pretty good. I mean, it was okay. It didn't really blow anybody away. He had a law and order moment that did well. But he needs to really sort of kick up his game if he's going to take over the reins from Trump. He's very subdued in his energy, and he doesn't talk off the cuff. He's very practiced. And you could see, I'm going to say something, and this is important. He's got that kind of cadence to him. So he needs to take a page out of Trump's book, I think, and start mixing things up a bit. Otherwise, now I hit it every time. Otherwise, I don't know if he's going to be able to be elected. Oh, and I guess they had a singer at the end. I must have missed that part. I sort of tuned out after a while. But, it was a pretty standard American Republican speech. The interesting thing was segueing into some Hollywood stuff. Stephen Colbert came on his show, and I missed funny Stephen Colbert. I believe he was serious. I didn't see it, but I read an article about it. Serious Stephen Colbert was talking about how he didn't watch the RNC. And he said something like, since they don't, their world doesn't comport with reality, why should we watch them, kind of thing. And the problem with that, of course, is that statistically, and Tim Pool has proved this in some of his videos, it's the exact opposite. It's really people on the left side of politics who are living in a bubble. And because they're so self-righteous and so full of themselves and constantly virtue signaling, that they've made that bubble worse and worse. Twitter has damaged them so severely. They've damaged themselves. Even though I think probably Stephen Colbert is smart enough to realize, Twitter is just Twitter. He doesn't realize, something like only 2% of Americans even use Twitter and are on it. It's a very tiny amount of people, and their politics have been truncated by the algorithms, by the Twitter staff, and it's all an echo chamber. And it hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. The studies indicate, and this is according to Tim Pool, that conservatives get a mix of opinions and liberals tend to not. And that's the truth. And independents, of course, we're wild cards. But he's on his show bragging that he didn't watch something. I mean, at this point, they just call Trump names. They don't address real issues. He's being all serious, but he's being all serious in sort of a pandering way. Well, Trump is a racist. Okay, if you believe that, show us why you think he's a racist. Why you think, putting controls on the borders is a bad thing. Tell us your concept for America, not just, you got to elect Biden because he's going to fix everything. No, tell us policy. If you're going to get into it, Steven, former comedian, get into it. Tell us what you really think. Don't stand there and virtue signal and try to make some lame jokes to your audience who only they would laugh because they're just as nervous as you about the election. And part of your problem is, again, comedy, and I've always said this, it's about a shared experience. And the part of the reason people on the left cannot do comedy, they can't meme anymore, is because they don't have any shared experience with anybody other than people who agree with them. So while you could get a few chuckles and a little bit of mileage out of, those nasty Republicans don't comport to reality, but that's only from people who agree with you politically. Other people are going to read that and go, or watch that and go, I think that's an overstretch. I think you're out on your skis there, buddy, and it's not very funny. How about making me laugh? So, Stephen used to have amazing takes against George W. Bush. But, in Bush's defense, well, not really in his defense, but, he's a war criminal. But he was an easy target in a lot of ways. You could bash Bush all day. He was just so stupid and mean, and, his administration would just lurch from one disaster to another. Part of the reason I think a guy like Colbert has so many problems making fun of Trump is a lot of what he makes fun of, ignores some of the things Trump did that are good. It ignores the foibles of the Democrats. The Democrats are effing this up, Stephen, and they are ripe to be satirized. And you're too busy having them as guests on your show. So, if you want to get woke and go broke, that's your choice. But I think it's really sad. I think it's incredibly sad, the state of comedy and the state of television, that you just can't even watch the RNC. That you've actually gotten to the point where, just censor them. Let's not talk about them. Let's ignore them. Let's not debate them. Good luck with that strategy. You're losing people every day. And this is exactly the sort of behavior that gets Donald Trump elected.